Wings and LA Law return next Thursday with all new episodes. Now stay tuned for David Letterman's 10th anniversary special.
Believe me, I'm just as sick as you are about preempting LA Law.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
His paintings redefined comic book heroes. His vision inspired a generation. The Legend of Kingdom Come is the definitive documentary on Alex Ross, known as the Norman Rockwell of comics.
It almost looked like Renaissance paintings, except for superheroes.
He makes them look like Olympian gods.
We go behind the scenes of his definitive graphic novel, Kingdom Come, now on Blu-ray, packed with exclusive interviews and unseen artwork. Order today at legendofkingdomcome.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Today, we'll be joined by Marc Laming and Alex DeCampi, the creative team behind a fresh take on Dan Dare, legendary space opera hero originally brought to life in the 1950s in Eagle Comics. We'll talk about Dan's roots, the classic creators who shaped him, and what's next from Alex and Marc on this iconic character. They're in the midst of a Kickstarter campaign to get the first of 3 volumes of Dan Dare out there. Marc is killing it on the art, and Alex, as always, killing it on the story. This is a great team and a great character. So join Marc, Alex, and myself as we talk Dan Dare on today's Word Balloon. Alex DeCampi, Marc Laming, welcome back to Word Balloon. This is great. I love, after I get to know a couple creators, when they are working on a project together and I get to do a jam session. Normally I like to do one-on-ones, but having known both of you for so many years, it's great to see you, and I'm very excited for this project. So welcome.
Thank you. We're so thrilled to be here.
Say something so you're on camera, Marc.
Yeah, lovely to see you.
Great to see you as well. And yeah, I've got it set so we're not in 3 boxes like a game show. When the speaker will be fully on camera. This is great, though. I'm very excited. I'm a massive over-the-seas fan of Dan Dare, as much as an American can be. So, Alex, I should start because you guys are doing a Kickstarter for this Dan Dare thing. What attracted you to the project, or what inspired you to do the project?
I'd always been a big fan of Dan Dare as well, and I moved house about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and of course I have lots of books, so I was unpacking the books, and it was an older house that we moved into that doesn't have like built-in bookshelves or anything. So I was, unpacking books, triaging which ones I wanted to keep and which ones I wanted to put away, and also just sitting in the middle of the floor reading books, because that's what happens when you unpack boxes of books. You're like, oh, I haven't seen this in a while. And I pulled out some old, Eagle compendiums and started flipping through Dan Dare and was just like, God, this is so good. Like, why hasn't anyone done a kind of James Gunn Superman style version of Dan Dare? There have been several reinventions of Dan Dare, and there's a pro zine called Spaceships Away that continues the story. So like there is Dan Dare, but nobody's done a kind of ultimate absolute DC movie Superman kind of story with it, where you don't have to know anything going in ahead of time, and you lean into the space adventure, action, suspense side of it, and modernize the characters a bit. So I think people, Frank Hampson's work is really stunning. It is darker under the surface than you think it is, but there are elements of it that initially, unless you are very open-minded, are very, very difficult to modernize. Like Al Digby is Dan's Batsman. He's this kind of like middle-aged, overweight comedy working class guy from Wigan in the north. And no one knows what a batsman is anymore. It's the kind of the enlisted man who's assigned to an officer to kind of take care of their stuff and be their assistant. They don't exist in modern culture. So you kind of have to figure out what to do with Digby. That's one of the many considerations, but I just started from a what if I could make a story that I could hand to anyone, whether they know Dan Dare inside and out, or they've never heard of it at all, and go, hey, do you like comics about spaceships? And they go, yes, because all right thinking people like comics about spaceships. And I'll go, here, oh, I think I've heard of Dan Dare. Where do I have to start with this? Chapter 1. That's it. Page 1, chapter 1. That's it. That's where you start. And I wrote to the Dan Dare Corporation and said, hi, I have actually written comics before. I'm not completely random, but I'd like to do this. And they said, oh, we'd love that too. And then the project just went from there. I spoke to Mark. Mark will tell his own Dan Dare story in a moment. He suggested B7 Comics because they'd done radio adventures on the BBC, the Dan Dare radio adventures, and then it just all went from there.
That's cool. All right, Mark, your side of the story.
Well, Dan Dare has always been a thing in some of my earliest comic memories is Dan Dare. My dad was a huge fan, had the Eagle as a kid. So whenever I'd have my comics at home, it's not as good as the Eagle. And for years and years and years, I didn't see it. I just got told that my comics were rubbish. And then he around about 1977, he turned up with this is the Eagle, with the best of, and it was sort of love at first sight from there. And also being a fan of like old World War II films and things like that, the whole Battle of Britain feel of Dan Dare was very appealing to me as a kid. Mm. And at the same time, you had the 2000 AD relaunch, which was kind of like the punk rock version of Dan Dare. So I had to sneak that one into the house. That couldn't be seen. That had to be that lived in a box under the bed.
Who was writing that 2000 AD version? Do you remember?
I think it's Tom Tully.
Yes, I believe. Yes, indeed. I know the name. Absolutely. Yeah. I think you're right. That's cool. No, again, man, I'm a big Anglophile. I would assume, Alex, are you an Anglophile as well?
Well, I'm a British citizen, so.
Forgive me. I didn't realize you're a British citizen. My goodness. All right then. I'm speaking internationally. This is very good. I love this. I've always been a fan of British comedy. I think I came to British science fiction late 70s, early 80s, think various Doctor Who and the like. But yeah, Dan Dare, I mean, being a Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers guy who grew up on the old stuff, Dan Dare intrigued me. And it's got a very different flavor, wouldn't you say, Alex?
Yes, definitely. It's been it's funny because Ridley Scott's a massive Dan Dare fan. George Lucas loved Dan Dare, and you can see, C-3PO is basically Al Digby, but with an RP, a posh accent. He is the comedy sidekick who kind of bimbles about. So there's a lot that inspired the original Star Wars that came straight out of Dan Dare.
That's cool.
So it's funny. It's got its fingerprints in so many different things. It's echoes.
Yeah, just like Burroughs and John Carter. When everyone sees the prequels and don't realize, and then John Carter comes out and they're like, oh, they're ripping off Lucas. It's like, no, actually, it's quite the opposite. So I completely understand that. Mark, as you got older and got exposed to some of the American space opera heroes and stuff, how did they stack up to Dan? And tell me what you thought from a different standpoint.
Well, the quality on the art, especially, was so high. It was very difficult for your American monthlies to match it because they had a whole team working on Dan Dare. Frank Hampson would do little roughs, go in and ink the figures that he wanted to ink, and then he had people doing airbrushing and all sorts of other things. And the whole thing was posed for camera as well, so it was meticulously done. So it's very difficult for the American market comic to match that. So it would be things like the Flash Gordon newspaper strips, Prince Valiant, and anything by Al Williamson and Frank Frazetta and Wally Wood that would be comparable, if you see what I mean, in terms of quality. So for a long time, I found American comics quite ugly, and it took me a while to get past that. And it was the action adventure in the Kirby Marvel stuff that really dragged me in. But I still thought it was quite ugly for a lot of years. Because we were used to these dashing looking comics.
I understand. And is does Dan have a hero ship? I mean, is his ship distinct in the way that the Enterprise is, or the Jupiter too?
The
Anastasia, yes, absolutely.
At the time, was very much a kind of hero ship.
So, great opportunity to. Were you already drawing it as a kid, and so now you can do it professionally?
My dad had all sorts of Damned Air memorabilia. It turned out in the end, so we had push-out cardboard models of the Anastasia. There was a mobile, I think, up in the loft somewhere, which had the various spaceships. So, after he'd sort of announced that this was a thing I should be interested in, suddenly stuff started appearing.
That's good. He's a good father, man. That's excellent. Well, again, you guys are the right team, and Mark, I will lean on you for a second because you've done a lot of great sci-fi over the years, and I even and even very recently as well. And also, all right, now I'm blanking, and you'll forgive me because I got a million things going on over here in the States. But the great alien race, Alex, Dan's chief rival alien race.
Oh, the Mekon and the Treen.
The Mekon, yes.
Yeah.
What do they represent? And I mean, as you said, because really there is a lot of analogy buried in the Dan Dare stories and stuff. So yeah, tell me about the Mekons.
I mean, the Mekons were very much you also have to remember that Frank Hampson was writing a lot of this, especially the early stories, where the shadow of World War II and its aftermath were looming very large over him and all of the UK. So the Mekons were the Mekon himself was a kind of dictator who took an otherwise peaceful country and oppressed it, or an otherwise peaceful planet, and turned the Treen, who were a sort of a peace-loving agrarian society, into his weapons, his soldiers, and are ultimately defeated by soldiers that choose not to fight, and choose to work against the Mekon. In Voyage to Venus, which was really the big first arc of the Dan Dare stories. And again, that's another thing that, the green aliens with the big heads, that's become such a cultural moment. You kind of forget that came from Dan Dare. And you see the Mekon, you're like, oh, that's a really stereotypical alien. Well, no, he was doing it first, and then everyone did it like him, and then it became the stereotypical alien because what was originally groundbreaking and landmark became just the touch point for everything. We don't actually meet the Mekon in book one. That happens later in the arc, but so the first contact is not with the Treens or with the Mekon. I will leave you that much. His first contact is with one of my favorite alien species in all of Dan Dare, but kind of one that flies a bit under the radar.
So would you say that is it an origin story, or how would you class it? I mean, I understand, especially given that beyond the British market, you are going to do it for an American market as well. But or tell me what the what the focus is. But yeah, I mean, I don't want you to spoil the story, but yeah, kind of describe it, and also the audience you're going for with this.
It's really taking the Ultimate Spider-Man concept and applying it to Dan Dare. We're starting from the beginning again. Dan Dare didn't really have an origin per se, like old comic strips didn't. You just here's the main character, off he goes. That's sort of what we're doing here. But he's, rather than a colonel, he's a captain. He's a young captain in the British Space Fleet. This is kind of at the beginning of his career. We're doing a lot that's in the original stories, but with our own versions and different timings and timelines. So yeah, that was basically the concept of start him rather than trying to extend a continuity, which makes people feel, even if you're like, oh, you don't, this extends the continuity, but you can still start here. There are a lot of people that push back against that. I push back against that in comics, like, oh, great jumping on place for new readers. Yeah, is it though? And I would rather just start at the beginning. I'm a big manga reader. I like the chapter one bro concept. So that was the thought behind it. And also, I think it's even fun for people who are very well acquainted with Dan Dare and very well acquainted with the Hampson and Bellamy stories to read what we're doing and see what we've carried through as is and what we've modified to modernize it or to kind of tell our story, which I think would be a story that Frank Hampson would really enjoy and kind of, realize was carrying on his tradition in a way.
And Mark, is there a good opportunity here to draw some of these aliens for the first time? Are you designing new aliens for the book?
Oh, most of this will be new. I'm really looking at this as being an audience that doesn't know the character, and we can start. So rather than it being, as I was saying before, the Battle of Britain, I'm thinking of this more as Top Gun, and that kind of level of excitement. Because we want kids to be reading this as well as adults. I want to have the same appeal that the original strip had. And I don't, Frank Hampson wouldn't, if he was doing it now, wouldn't be setting it within the sort of parameters that he did in the 50s. So that's my thought process is, if I was Frank Hampson now, what would I do?
And Alex, that's a good question in terms of, where modern military is compared to that, like you said, the post-World War II era, where they were still kind of, rubbing their wounds and feeling the post-war effects. So yeah, how do you, frame that aspect of Dan Dare?
Yeah, and a lot of the original rockets they drew looked like suspiciously like V2 rockets. How do we modernize it? I mean, we started off by looking at what had happened. Hampson kind of assumes there's this, the Earth comes together in this kind of United Nations-esque one world, international space fleet, which obviously isn't looking like it's going to happen right now.
Yeah, that's what Star Trek is struggling with right now, as far as idealistic as the Federation is. So, I mean, I wish they were a little more positive because it is the future, but I do understand. Yeah, talk to me. Go ahead.
So, we've set up the Earth is still like fractured into all its countries. The United States is now the United Corporations of America. We had fun with that. I'm writing notes to Mark for later on in the book. There's Dan has two friends, Hank and Pierre. Hank is American, Pierre is French. Hank's airplane, I was like, draw out like a giant SUV with NASCAR stickers all over it, and it's got advertising all over it. And then Pierre's is more like it's like a French sports car, but with like very subtle branding, kind of like a French football team. Much more sleek, smaller. So we're having a lot of fun kind of taking what Frank Hampson imagined and then kind of being like, okay, well, from where we are now, what would it look like? And then the British Space Fleet, the one non-privatized space force, because everything else has been privatized, it's done for profit, is the British Space Fleet, which was nationalized. Britain does love to nationalize a thing. In fact, I think it should go back to it. Thames Water could be a good start. Hello, British listeners. So it gets all the shit jobs. Like, it's badly funded. Everyone's trying their best. Like, they don't have the resources, and they do like a lot of emergency search and rescue and interception of people who are getting into trouble in space, because there's no money in that. Want to launch a satellite? Yeah, there 20 countries will bid on that, but want to go retrieve somebody whose engines have fouled and they're going into an asteroid belt. Call the British, maybe they'll do it. And so it's fun to have Britain as the plucky underdog again, against the, all the gear, no idea Americans and the Europeans who can't come to agreement on anything. Yeah, I mean, I like and of course, the Earth is suffering from climate change, and if you notice on the page one that we sent you, the water goes right up to the Parliament buildings. Like the Houses of Parliament was built on a swamp, and it's returned to the swamp because the water level is up, the embankment's gone. The first couple of levels of Parliament are all underwater. No, seriously.
Yeah. That's great.
Nobody loved building on a swamp quite like Gothic architects did. They're like looking at a hill and going, nah. These over here where the cattails grow. Let's build something over there. So yeah, there's it's a worldview where there is still hope, and there's still people really trying to do good things, and there's still civil servants, government workers trying to make life better for people. But there is also corporations who don't give a shit, and a damaged climate, and problems growing food for everybody because of the climate change, and changes to our cities because of the water levels rising and things like that. So it's a very nuanced world. Because of the need to get moving fairly quickly, we whiz you past it in the first couple of pages. Like if you look very carefully, it's all there. But I didn't want to. I realize we have very little time to get readers interested, especially when you're doing something like funding it via Kickstarter, and we want to just like get stuck into the first mission really quickly. We will come back and touch on a lot of the points that we sort of gloss over very quickly in the beginning. They are very important to the larger arc of the 3 books, but we get back to them.
Okay, all right, Mark. When really both of you, Alex, I know you're an experienced Kickstarter person. You've been involved in a lot of successful ones. In fact, the last time we talked, and forgive me, I forget the specific details, and I will ask you to tell me. But are you guys working with another company that's handling the heavy lifting of the crowdfunding aspect and everything? Or what's going on from that standpoint? Like
Yes,
a Zoop or somebody, or
yeah, we're working with B7 Comics. We're doing it on Kickstarter, not Zoop. We're working with B7 Comics, who have published a number of very well regarded indie comics in the UK, and who also work with the BBC a lot. And they did the Dan Dare radio stories, which you can also get as a reward on the Kickstarter if you want.
Oh, wonderful.
And we like them. Not only are they just really nice people and really easy to work with, the licensor at Dan Dare knew them already and trusted them, which mattered a lot, because a Kickstarter was not the easiest sell to them, but they did ultimately agree. It helped that I'd written the entire script, so they knew exactly what they were getting. I am a weirdo who will write the entire story before sending it to the artist, which means I'm never late on pages.
Atta girl. No, that's great.
Which is really appreciated.
Well, it's because I write thrillers and suspense a lot. Like thrillers aren't written; they're rewritten, and it is a regular feature of me being deep into like chapter 5 of a script and having to go back and change things in chapters 2 and 3 to better set up the twist in chapter 5, or to literally lean Chekhov's gun against the mantle in chapter 2 so we can fire it in chapter 5. And there are 2 ways to do that. Either you just write the whole damn story first, or you have to ask your artist, oh hey, like pages 7, 8, and 9 in chapter 2, would you mind changing these things? And and the second version is not the good way to do it.
Have you worked, Mark, with B7 before?
I've known Andrew, who's one of the directors, for years. He was a manager at the first comic book store I worked at. But before that, he'd worked as a producer and director at the BBC. It was an odd comic shop because it was 2 guys from the BBC and a couple of guys who were very successful businessmen, but had been comic book fans and sellers and swappers of comics since they were about 7. And they'd known each other that long. So they used to spend the whole time very much sort of ribbing each other about comic swaps that had gone wrong in the playground that they were still not forgiving each other for.
That's awesome. It always feels like, Mark, again, as the ugly American here, that that the Brits have always stuck with sci-fi from a mainstream standpoint. Again, that's the perception here. I as someone who's been there their whole lives, because in fact, you and I, the three of us, were talking about this TV show. It's on YouTube, everybody, if you want to check it out. It's called Space Cops. It's from the mid '80s, and it's kind of a dry police procedural, but it happens on like space shuttles. It was made in like the mid '80s. It's supposedly the year of 2027, and all the action is happening on spaceships and space stations. And it's '80s kind of sci-fi special effects. It works for me. It looks very much like the old MTV kind of videos when they would use the astronaut as a mascot and stuff. But Mark, honestly, like, and you were saying that you missed it back in college, but it does feel like sci-fi has always been there with the Brits. I don't know how it's been reflected from a mainstream standpoint.
Well, I guess we were brought up with. I think again, it's the World War II thing that you could put action and adventure onto something that the men returning from war who were going to be writing and making these comics could do, that was still action and adventure and wasn't necessarily Germans killing Tommies.
Sure.
Or the Japanese. So I guess that's where it came from. And things like the Jerry Anderson shows were a really big thing.
Oh yeah.
The looming shadow of Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, and Stingray on me, in terms of how I design, or even my graphic design work is all based around the stuff from those shows. Never have kids shows been so well designed as those.
That's a Thunderbird right there in your main shot right now, right?
It is. Yep.
Which number is that? 2. Number 2. That's great, man. No, it's crazy. There's a cartoon channel here in the States now, and they do run Jerry Anderson stuff literally at 5 a.m. East Coast time. And it's the puppets are great, but it really was the design of the ships and the headquarters and all that stuff that, I could even show it to my young nephews back in the 90s when they were little kids, and they're like, oh, puppets. And then they see the models and they're like, wow, that looks cool. And, the vehicles and the stuff. So I can appreciate that from a world building.
Very little of that is dated either, so whatever they were on at the time, the guys designing and working on that stuff created something timeless.
But it really it felt like, again, decades later, because that was the 60s, and I do realize that a lot of his stuff continued. And I don't know the full timeline, but then you go to obviously Doctor Who, but even what Douglas Adams was doing, and like I said, this Space Cop show, I'm like, where the hell did this come from? Oh, that's cool,
Yeah,
but it
you
just
had Blake 7 as well, which ran for a good long while.
Yep.
Red Dwarf.
Red Dwarf.
Yeah, which was, again, just look, because it was the same special effects people. They always felt a bit like they were the same show but different.
That's cool, honestly. So yeah. Again, it just feels like the public obviously supported these things, or again, maybe it was still niche the way it is here in the States. I don't know.
No, it was that was our action adventure. We didn't really have superheroes. You did a bit in the 50s with Marvel Man, but that was which was very, very popular in its time. But by the time you got to the 60s, I think we were looking forward rather than backwards, and the 50s sort of strongman thing wasn't something that kids in the UK thought was cool. It wasn't until the Marvel comics started coming over and they were a bit more exciting looking.
Did you? I'm sorry.
No, no,
Go ahead, Mark.
no. I was just going to say, it wasn't really until they came over and were in color, because a lot of the stuff we got was black and white, that they impressed more. So, there was a moment sort of around about 1973 where the whole world went color from having been black and white,
Including Doctor Who. I know that was a big
oh yeah,
deal.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. No, Alex, did you how much of the old stuff did you look at to inform you beyond the basics?
I mean, I grew up watching Doctor Who, but I also grew up watching the Japanese anime, Star Blazers and Battle of the Planets, which were, you know, Gatchaman and Space Battle Cruiser Yamato in the Japanese releases. And so I watched a bit of Star Trek, wasn't super into Star Trek. I like it well enough, like I like Star Wars well enough, but both of them right now are just such massive universes that unless like I feel like unless you have a certain embedding in it, it's very hard to get into it now because like I just look at it and I just go, God, there's so much of it. And people are like, oh well, you can just watch this show, it's completely standalone. And I'm like, but it's such a big universe and I don't want to. So I have a real like mental block about giant universes, which is why you don't tend to see me play in them very often in terms of licensed comics or work for hire. Because I just look at it and think, I have to read so much to do this. It's going to be so much effort to create an original story and do the research for it by reading old books. There's someone out there who already knows the old books, who's probably a decent enough writer and loves the characters, and I'll just write my own thing and instead. But yeah, I think my writing has always been an interesting mix of UK sci-fi standards and Japanese space opera, with the big spectacles, but the really very solid and sentimental emotional arcs that come with a lot of anime and manga. And emotional arcs aren't really something that you talk about in like Western action quite as much, but you really got to feel what they're feeling, and I like to put a lot of emotion into it, even when it's a character like Dan Dare, who is seen as this kind of incorrectly seen as this kind of jolly hockey sticks like British Empire character. Dan goes through it in the story, like he has some tough times.
Well, I was wondering too if you're looking specifically at any past Dan Dare, like Mark, was it Warren or was it Garth that did a Dan Dare in the last like 10 or 20 years?
Well, they've both kind of done it, because Warren did
Ministry of
Space, which was his
right.
kind of darker, more twisted, I hate the British Empire version of Dan Dare. And Garth did the full-on action adventure. This should be a war film version.
But Ministry
Garth doing something that should be like and making
I know,
be a war
weird,
film.
right?
I'm shocked.
I just had him on to talk about Johnny Red, and I forget what other war comic we spoke of. I love.
I love Garth.
Yeah,
I love him to pieces. He's a fantastic writer. But like, if you give Garth something that could possibly be a war story, Garth will make it a war story.
Yeah.
And then Pete Milligan did one fairly recently. Did a Dan Dare story, and then someone did like the old Dan Dare reflects on Empire. Was that Morrison?
That was Grant Morrison and Ryan Hughes.
Yeah,
the artwork is beautiful on that. But
it's Ryan Hughes.
But it's completely 1989 in its politics. It's
interesting.
Margaret Thatcher is the prime minister, who isn't the prime minister, called Thea Monday, which is about as pointing to your nose and going, "This is what I'm talking about," as possible.
Yeah.
The Iron Lady, absolutely, man. No, again, even from afar, I loved The Crown and that season
where Gillian Anderson played Thatcher. I thought that, and with Olivia Colman, man, then that's like Ali Frazier as far as acting, man. You had two titans just going at it, and just very quietly. I love that. So no, and again, I can appreciate having a hero in that kind of world. Well, we got V for Vendetta in the same kind of way. So, but that's the thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, Alex, this is great. I mean,
But
really,
it's such an easy choice to be like, oh, I'm going to take this old thing and make it kind of like dirty and show why it was problematic. And that's like a really typical like male comic dude writer kind of like, I'm going to put my stamp on this and like, look, I'm going to show, like, I'm going to make it have a down ending because life is real and earnest and like, good fucking God. Like, I'm so like, please just don't, go back to fridging women on in the first 8 pages of your Image miniseries, buddy. So yeah, like I feel that those choices are talked about a lot, but they are so easy and so frequently done, and had been in fact done before in Dan Dare by quite well-known writers, that there was no point just doing that over again. And we just like, everything sucks, man. I want a fun comic.
That was my big attraction when Alex told me the outline, was that it wasn't a grim and gritty reimagining, and that I could bring things like my love of anime to it, in with things like the Macross Saga and Robotech stuff could all appear, and it's all on the page. I'm not hiding it at all. That's where I'm coming from. So it was a real relief that it wasn't going to be, Dan has social issues and really shouldn't be in space. He should be, in a home being looked after. Which is the obvious, very boring way of looking at the character to update it.
what about women characters, Alex? What do you have strong women, and how are women represented
Well,
in the story?
I had like there. I'm given Professor Peabody, who's pretty much the three main characters of Dan Dare. Well, the four really. There's Dan, there's Al Digby, who's now a young working class inventor from Wigan, who's like kind of chaotic, and still has that slight comedy tinge to him, but like his relationship with Dan is different now. And I like the way they play off each other really well. And then there's Professor Peabody, who's probably the third major character in all of Dan Dare, who is a woman scientist. She's the leading xenobotanist and xenobiologist on Earth and off Earth. We meet her off Earth, I think, first. In my story, we meet her on Mars, and she's great because canonically, Dan's Uncle Ivor is a xenobotanist, also not as good as Professor Peabody, and his father was also a space explorer. And I kind of had this view of his father being this kind of Instagram history influencer guy who's like, yeah, there are, pyramids under the Arctic ice, and aliens came to visit us, and Professor Peabody like thinks who's working with Ivor Dare and doesn't really like him, thinks the entire Dare family can just go to hell as far as she's concerned. She thinks they're all idiots and fools, and she can't stand Dan's father, who disappeared and is presumed dead on a manned intergalactic space flight. And she would get so frustrated with the funding he would get to do absolute just fuck all and arse about and tell incorrect science to people. Well, she struggled to get funding to do real science. So she's a lot of fun. She was always very fierce and determined in the original Dan Dare. Like she was never anybody's fool and never anyone's patsy, and she genuinely brought scientific knowledge because Hampson like really did his best to make the science correct, and it was very well done for the late 1950s. So she wasn't just like decorative or there to be damseled. She was there to to teach science and kick ass, and sometimes she ran out of science.
I love that Dan's father is that kind of Chariots of the Gods, Eric Von Daniken kind
Yeah,
of
like
attitude. Space
aliens. Yeah,
Ancient Aliens. Yeah, man. No,
yeah,
absolutely that.
and he was always away as well. So Dan, barely ever saw his father, and his relationship with his father is kind of via, what his mother told him, and just like a few like ships passing in the night, father passing through, kind of thing. Um, and that's sort of based on something in my family where my uh, grandmother was married before she was once before she married my grandfather, and she was married to Bud Waite, who was who was the radio man for, I think it was a Munson. It was one of the polar explorers,
Wow.
and there was a Bud Wake Day in Boston. Like, he was a big dude in Boston, and he was always out on exploration. He would like kind of come back long enough to just father another child, and then he'd leave. And my grandmother worked because she like in 1930s, no man to be there and help her out. And then she finally left him after, I think, he knocked up um, a camp counselor. Um, Married my grandfather, a much better guy who stayed home and managed a factory, zipper factory, and had my mother. So, the idea of someone growing up, and the impact on my three aunts, my three half aunts, of this, absent parent manifested itself in startlingly different ways. Um, some of them really, really not good.
Is Dan chasing then his father, do you think, in terms of,
He's well, he's trying to distance himself from his father. I mean, it's kind of like like hippie parents have cop kids, and cop parents have hippie kids. So, like, Dan went into the civil service. He went into, the British Space Fleet, where he could just have an extremely regular, regimented life where, he put on his uniform, he went to work, he did his missions, he came back, he was helping people, but there were very kind of strict parameters around it, and a lot of order and organization, and he kind of knows what tomorrow will bring. And that's because, when you have an absent parent and a lot of financial uncertainty, you just don't know what tomorrow brings. So the whole idea of like putting on a uniform and going to work, and being able to depend on, being wanted, having a job, having money, like, if, going to the caf for food, all of these things are really great. So that's the appeal of the Space Force to him. Now things become a lot more chaos. One of the big things for Dan across our story is the regimentation of his life completely shatters, after, in part of, as a side effect, as a primary effect of the mission he's on in book one.
Gotcha.
And so
Okay.
we, everything that was his like firm, solid base is just completely kicked out from underneath him.
You got 3 volumes planned. But would you say volume 1 will be self-contained, despite obviously dovetailing into probably the subsequent books?
Yeah, one is completely self-contained. I mean, there's a special place in hell for people that do a volume one on a Kickstarter and it ends on a cliffhanger. I mean, like, just, dude, fuck you. Like, there's a really, really satisfying ending. However, there's a little bit like dun dun dun, that kind of like Alex Raymond, you're seeing past someone's silhouetted hand going like, get me the head of Dan Dare. Like, not that obvious, but there's clearly like, there's a happy ending, but there's clearly trouble brewing.
Very cool. No, I'm excited, man. Mark, I got to ask and announce also for recent projects, that great thing you did with Stephanie Phillips. I want to say for Distillery and a water
Yeah,
adventure, right? Remind me, man. It's been a while
yeah.
since I.
It's Lord of the Flies set at sea. It's called Endeavour, set on Captain Cook's, or a replica of Captain Cook's um, ship that he sailed round Australia and New Zealand and brought disease to the masses.
Yeah, you're right. I was gonna say though, despite the disease, very lush art. Well done, dude. I mean, honestly, it was so gorgeous. And when I talked to Steph about it, obviously, I was looking at your art, and really, admiring what you were doing. And it's more of a drama at sea with kids
Yeah.
than what you're doing now with Dan Dare and everything. But yeah, man, it's gorgeous.
Well, thank you very much. It was a lot of work. That's what I can.
Because they were
Ocean
oversized.
backgrounds, the same ship over and over again.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that was, and just doing kids like that was a. There are very few artists that could have. That was a really difficult script. I don't know if Steph knew it was difficult when she wrote it. Some writers don't. But it was a fiendishly difficult script to draw, and I think Mark is one of the few living artists who could have done it any justice at all.
Yeah, I think it's gorgeous, and they oversized too, Mark. So I know it's a shit ton of pages too, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it played into my wheelhouse because I don't like small comics anymore. After having worked with the French, you just have that luxury of size and real estate to play with. It's no surprise that Chaikin was always encouraging me to go into that market when he was, mentoring me during doing American Century, because it's just freeing up, and we're doing this at A4 size, so it's just under French album size.
For Dan Dare, it's going to be
just
under.
Yeah. So
that's great.
Book.
Well, that's good, man, because then your art can sing, man, and you're not confined to that traditional comic size. So that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it was great working for Humanoids, except for when the US version came out, comic book size, and it was like, oh my God, people are going to need a magnifying glass for this, because I've drawn this with the idea that it's a big book.
What was that? You did a recent space thing as well.
That was Eden, which was
right.
A family stowing away on a ship that was supposedly going to the colonies, and you find out that things are not quite what they seem.
Again, unbelievable stuff. And Alex, the last time we spoke, you did this great Kickstarter, and I know it was tied to a filmmaker and stuff. It was ridiculously successful. But remind people of that.
Yeah, that was Maddie with Duncan Jones. And we just reissued the book because Z2 went through some stuff, and also they never managed to get it online. They never managed to get it digitally, and a lot of people like digital now to read digital nowadays. So we just reissued the book through Image back little less than a year ago, and we both kind of remastered it, and the Image edition I think is. We also reissued True War Stories, which was the other Kickstarter I did around that time. Sort of remastered and tweaked and improved both books, and I think those are the best editions I've got. I also had a Dark Horse graphic novel which came out last year called Reversal, which Dark Horse did no promo for, which was depressing and probably will is. Well, it's my last book at Dark Horse. I'm unfortunately I'm done with them. They my editor was lovely, but
yeah, I didn't hear anything.
The complete lack of marketing was shameful. And everyone who's read it loves it. I mean, it was on individual people's books of the year list, but nobody knew it came out.
I think marketing has disappeared from comics. You just don't see it in the same way. I don't know if that's because we don't have physical press anymore, like Wizard and things like, or Comics International in the UK anymore. But it is definitely down to the creative teams and not the publisher these days to promote books.
Yeah, certainly.
Back when I was exclusive with DC at the beginning of the 2000s, we were not encouraged to do any promotion because the company wanted to keep it, whereas now you are praised to the skies for doing it because they can't be bothered.
Yeah, that's been the scope of Word Balloon, literally not getting access and getting a lot of no's when I started in 05. Because of they didn't even know what a podcast was, to now where it is like hey, you want to talk to some of our people? And certainly, Marvel and DC has always been cooperative, but now all these new publishers are like, hey, who do you want to talk to from our team? These are the books we're doing. So that's, I mean, advantageous for me, but I respect that, and it is harder for you people to beyond making the donuts that you got to go out and really sell them the way that you
Yeah,
do.
I just assume that no one's going to promote a book I'm working on, so I make sure that I'm feeding my social media with stuff all the time. And people, you get the oh, you're spoiling stuff, but no one is going to see it and remember it for long enough for you to be spoiling anything. You're lucky with engagement these days if it hits. So you have to keep on doing it.
No, I understand. Alex, you've been, I mean, I remember Smoke. I mean, that was the first thing that you did that I was aware of. And you've always been working with the companies, but also doing your own thing. And as you've seen the creator-owned market change the way it has, and also crowdfunding and digital comics, what are your perceptions of what's been going on?
I mean, I've just decided I want to make comics a certain way, so I'm just doing that. And I'm if I'm lucky enough to be able to kickstart it, that's great, and that's probably my way forward from now on. But books like Bad Karma and Parasocial and Dracula Motherfucker, which all came out via Image, who's probably my preferred, you know, who actually does marketing. Like, Kat and her team work really, really hard, but to market the book both in the book market and the direct market. I mean, we had arcs for Parasocial. Like, when have you last seen an arc for a comic? Like, they printed them up for ALA. So I've been really, really happy with Image, but I just make books very slowly. I can write a book a year. I also have a full-time job and I'm a single parent. So like things do get, and we're in the middle of renovating a house. So like things get busy. And so I don't have a lot of patience for other people not doing their job. So Bad Karma took us 3 or 4 years to make, slowly on and off. I'm working on a book with Carlos Speed McNeil, which will be another 3 or 4 years to make, on and off. Kids. So talking animal adventure book. If you imagine, Miyazaki, but set in the dirtbag South.
I'm talking to Carla in a couple weeks.
Well, ask her about Raccoon Crime Squad, which is her book with me.
And Raccoon what? Say it again.
Raccoon Crime Squad.
Crime Squad. Fantastic. No, that's great. No, because the last time I talked to Carla was when you guys were doing Bad
No
Idea.
Mercy.
No Mercy. Thank you, buddy. Yes. The kids, the thing about the kids and the trauma that they go through.
The last Kids on a Trip Go Horribly Wrong book, the one before Endeavor. So ours was kids on a service trip and things go badly, badly wrong. So it kind of doesn't matter to me what the industry does. I am seeing interesting trends. I am seeing trends that I fully expected to see in the industry playing out, which is there was a huge boom with the streaming boom. There was a huge boom in like VC funded small indie comic book companies that were touting creator owned contracts, but the contracts were not actually fully creator owned. They were company controlled. And those companies existed to sell options and get producing rights on their stuff. And we watch all sorts of crazy shit happen, like people's options being sold to related companies for $5,000, and then the related company getting all the production fees, which can be like $50,000 an episode. There was so much nonsense going on. Aftershock saying to people that, oh, well, your book isn't in the black, so we're going to subtract the money for your option that we sold without asking you from the amount that you owe us because your book is in the red, so you're not going to get any money. And by the way, the market value of an option is somewhere between 25 and 50 grand. We sold it for $5,000 to our related company. There was so much nonsense, and there was so little education, and there were people signing those deals. And everyone signs a bad deal every so often. If you need to put bread on the table, you need to work, that's fine. And you take what you're given, unfortunately. And now those companies are in really parlous financial straits because the VCs are pulling out, and almost nothing got optioned last year. It was one of the worst years in Hollywood book to film in
Decades.
living memory.
Yeah.
You know, tons of screenwriters aren't working, so all the comic
Yeah.
book writers who thought they'd pick up, you know, more work writing TV shows, working on TV shows are not working. You know, there's going to be a shakeout. We were publishing too many comics, and too many of them were completely mid. You know, everyone wants to publish a comic, but you know, there will be fewer, and I think in some ways that's a good thing, because there was a lot of shit published in the middle of the streaming boom that were clearly people writing miniseries to try to get it optioned. And you know, like, that's a choice, and I wish them well, but you know, very few of those will be memorable comics that will you know, that they're even remembered 2 years later, much less 5-10 years later. You know, I mean, we saw it with Distillery. Like, Distillery launched, everyone kind of wondered how they were selling comics. They pulled out Lunar and went to a like distribution contract with Diamond, an exclusive distribution contract, and like, you know, 6 months before Diamond went bust, and everyone was like, "What the fuck are you doing, man?" Like, Diamond going bust was one of those things that, like, you know, it's like that scene in Lawrence of Arabia, like you see it walking towards you for like 10 fucking minutes.
The pending doom. I do understand. And yeah, you know, yeah, I don't understand some of these choices either. Yeah, it is where, Mark, how are you surviving in the treacherous world? You're making
Yeah,
great
good.
stuff.
I mean, it all got very scary when COVID happened, because I had like 2 years work with mainstream comics lined up that just disappeared overnight. And I don't even want to think about how much money that was that I potentially lost. And as soon as that happened, I thought, well, look, you know, you're in your 50s, Mark. You're not getting any younger. You have to take control over this. So I decided that I was either going to do passion projects or creator-owned work from now on, nothing else. So it would have to be something that I was absolutely dying to do for a mainstream publisher to work on it, because you know they love you because they love your work, but but they don't love you at the same time, because you know industry gets in the way. So there's no loyalty in that which isn't a problem. It's just the way of the world.
Yes.
You know, when you realize that no one's trying to insult you, you know, and take your ego out of it, it's much easier to then clearly plan your career. So I've just taken control of it. I've lined up a lot of projects with writers that I want to work with, that we're going to either look for homes for, or we have homes for. You know, so I mean, I could list off a whole load of writers I'm going to be working with, which it's very exciting for me, and they're all people I really rate. But you know, I'm quietly planning this murderer's row of great projects, and then of course then Alex comes along and throws a spanner in the works by saying, "Does anybody want to draw Dan Dare?" And of course, before I thought about it, I put my hand in the air and gone, "Yeah, me." Because you know, if I don't do it, I'll be worried that somebody else is going to do it wrong.
You're the right guy for the job, Mark. And again, I've admired your work for decades, and Alex's work as well. And I'm very excited. How long is the campaign? When does it end?
We're in the first week.
Yeah.
The by the time this posts, I think the early bird discount will be ended because it ends at midnight tonight UK time.
Okay.
Then we've got another. It was a 45-day campaign, so we've got like 43 days left,
Good.
and
Okay.
we're over 3/4 of the way there. We've got a
Great.
bunch of sketch rewards and signed books being kind of restocked from, because we had limited amounts available in the early bird. Those went almost instantly last time, so I would strongly suggest that if people are interested, they do not hesitate. There's a hardback edition, there's a paperback edition, there's a PDF edition. We have some really exciting announcements coming up about the cover artists for those two editions. Mark is doing the cover for the bookstore edition, the book and comic shop edition that'll be sold through retailers. But we've got some pretty heavyweight guest stars coming in on the on the covers for the Kickstarter books. So pledge now and then hopefully be pleasantly surprised when we announce some names.
I'm excited, man. This is great. And truly, when I heard you guys were doing this, I immediately pounced on you. And I'm like, you got to come on and talk about this because I'm excited for Dan Dare. And again, I've been a longtime fan of Alex's writing. I've been a longtime fan of Marc's drawing as well. And is this the first time you guys have worked together?
No, we worked on some Robert E. Howard stuff together. We'd originally talked, I think it was at New York, about how there hadn't been a decent adaptation of Elric and we should do it. And we couldn't find anybody who had the rights for that. And then we lucked into doing Savage Sword just as it got cancelled. So at Dark Horse. And we've been trying to get projects together ever since. But, it's been aligning stuff.
Sure.
Publishers, we still really want to do an Elric adaptation. So, hit me up. I grew up on that book. Let me do Elric. Let Marc do Elric.
Sword and sorcery. So, I want to do it, even though the French did it beautifully.
Does someone own the rights, or or are the rights all tangled up, or?
Moorcock's estate.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Interesting. Boy, that'd be great. No, I'm for it. Absolutely. Well, in the meantime, we can enjoy space opera Dan Dare style coming from Alex DeCampi and Marc Laming. Again,
and Michael Woods. I have to mention Michael Woods is our colorist. You've seen the pages probably already.
Yes.
And the colors are truly, truly stunning.
Indeed.
And Michael is doing the work of his life. His colors are perfect for Marc's open line work. And, as long as I don't screw up the script and letters, we're all good.
My apologies to Michael Woods. Absolutely. No, it's gorgeous. The pages look great. I'm very excited for this. And it's the right team at the right time. So this was great. Thank you guys for coming on. And stay in touch. Keep me in the loop. Because, again, you're going to have to do your own marketing. So I expect to hear about these other projects you both have coming up. But, as always, really great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Thank you for having us, John.
Houston, make sure you subscribe to the Word Balloon podcast. Become a legal Word Balloon listener at patreon.com/wordballoon. I just here to tell you how to copy.